Picture the grandest party in 18th century London. The silver is polished, the wigs are powdered, and in the center of the table sits the single most expensive object in the entire room. Not a jewel, not a gold plate, a pineapple. And here is the strange part. Nobody is going to eat it. In fact, the host may not even own it. There is a decent chance that pineapple was rented for the evening, hired by the hour, to be carried around and admired and then handed back the next morning. Because in that world, a pineapple was worth more than most of the jewelry in the room, and eating one would have been like setting fire to a small fortune for dessert. Today you can buy a pineapple for pocket change and argue about whether it belongs on a pizza. 300 years ago, it was the ultimate symbol of wealth on earth, and by the end of this, you will understand exactly how a fruit became a flex. The pineapple's collision with Europe began, like so many food stories, with Christopher Columbus. In 1493, on his second voyage, his expedition landed on the Caribbean island of Guadeloupe and found this astonishing fruit. Spiky and armored on the outside, golden and impossibly sweet within, crowned with a spray of leaves like something a king would wear. The sailors had never tasted anything like it in a world before refrigeration and cheap sugar, where sweetness was rare and precious. They carried it back across the Atlantic, and when it reached the courts of Europe, it caused a sensation. People called it the king of fruits. Royalty wanted it. Artists painted it. It seemed less like food and more like a treasure that happened to be edible. But wanting the pineapple and getting the pineapple were two very different things, and this is where the madness begins. The pineapple is a tropical plant. It needs steady, sweltering heat to grow and to ripen, the kind of heat that simply does not exist in a cold, gray European winter. For roughly 200 years after Columbus, there was no reliable way to grow one on European soil at all. Every single pineapple in Europe had to be shipped, as fruit, across the Atlantic Ocean from the Caribbean. And that journey took weeks, sometimes months, in the warm, damp hold of a wooden sailing ship, which is just about the perfect environment for making a fruit rot. Most of them did. For every pineapple that arrived in Europe still golden and fragrant, a great many more turned to mush on the way and were thrown overboard. So do the math on that. A fruit that grows only in the tropics, that has to survive a brutal ocean crossing, and that spoils if you look at it wrong. What arrives is rare almost beyond belief, and rarity, then as now, means price. A single fresh pineapple in 18th century Britain could cost the equivalent of several £1,000s in today's money. Some estimates put it around $8,000 for one fruit. At that price, the pineapple stopped being something you ate and became something you displayed. It was proof, sitting right there on your table, that you were wealthy enough and connected enough to command the rarest luxury in the world. And because it was so valuable, an entire strange economy grew up around simply being seen with one. Confectioners and fruit sellers would rent pineapples out. If you were a social climber who could not afford to actually buy one, you could hire a pineapple for a special evening, carry it under your arm to a ball or a dinner, set it proudly at the head of your table, and return it the following day. The same pineapple might be rented again and again, passed from party to party, growing softer and browner with each outing until it was finally too far gone even to display, at which point some wealthy final customer might actually buy the exhausted, rotting thing and eat it. The fruit was so precious that its whole value was in being seen, not tasted. It was a status symbol you could hold in your hands. Naturally, the truly rich were not content to rent. They wanted to own, and better yet, to grow their own. And that ambition set off one of the most extravagant gardening arms races in history. Across the great estates of Europe, Aristocrats began building special heated glass houses called pineries, dedicated entirely to coaxing pineapples to fruit in a climate that wanted them dead. To generate the tropical heat, gardeners dug pineapple pits and packed them with vast quantities of rotting tanbark and manure, which, as it decomposed, threw off a steady warmth, a compost furnace beneath the plants. It took mountains of fuel, years of skilled labor, and constant attention. One estimate from 1764 reckoned that growing a single pineapple in England, once you counted the glasshouse, the imported plants, and 3 or 4 years of a gardener's work, cost around £80, a sum that could support a working family for a very long time. People were spending the price of a house to grow one piece of fruit, purely to prove they could. To grow your own pineapple was such a triumph that it was worth immortalizing in oil paint. There is a famous 17th-century picture associated with the artist Hendrik Dankertz, showing King Charles II of England being presented with a pineapple by his royal gardener John Rose, said to be the first pineapple grown on English soil. Whether it was truly homegrown or quietly imported and potted for the occasion, the message of the painting is unmistakable. A king receiving a fruit as though it were a crown jewel. That is how far the pineapple had climbed. It had become a thing that gardeners presented to monarchs. The obsession spilled out of the greenhouse and into architecture itself. The pineapple became a symbol, a shorthand for wealth, welcome, and hospitality, and its shape started appearing everywhere the rich wanted to signal status. They carved pineapples onto their gateposts and staircases, onto bedposts and furniture, onto the tops of buildings. If you have ever noticed a stone pineapple sitting on a gatepost or a hotel entrance and wondered why, that is the fossil of this exact craze, a 300-year-old brag frozen in stone. The most spectacular survivor is in Scotland, where in 1761, the Earl of Dunmore topped a garden building with an enormous, beautifully carved stone pineapple, some 14 meters tall. He built a giant pineapple out of stone on his estate, because nothing else could so perfectly announce that he was a man of the world. And then, almost as suddenly as it had risen, the king of fruits was overthrown, not by a rival luxury, but by simple speed and a tin can. In the second half of the 19th century, 2 things changed everything. First, faster steamships and, later, refrigeration meant that pineapples could be carried from the tropics to European and American markets quickly enough to arrive fresh and cheap, no longer a once-in-a-lifetime miracle, but a regular import. Then, at the turn of the 20th century, the pineapple industry of Hawaii perfected canning. Suddenly, the exotic fruit that had cost the price of a house could be bought, sliced, and preserved in a metal tin for a few coins sitting on a grocery shelf. The very thing that had made the pineapple precious, its rarity, evaporated. When everyone can have one, no one is impressed by one. So the pineapple made the strangest journey any food has ever made. It went from a Caribbean fruit to the most coveted status symbol in Europe, to a thing so valuable people rented it and painted kings holding it and carved it into their homes, and finally, in the space of a couple of generations, all the way down to a cheap tinned circle that starts arguments about pizza. Nothing has fallen further. That humble fruit in your shopping basket, the one you barely think about, is the dethroned king of fruits, the ghost of the most expensive thing a person could put on a table. Every food has an origin story. This is Foodling.